بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Alhamdulillah, it's nice to be back. Sorry for last week. I wasn't feeling too well, so we had to postpone the class. And as I mentioned last time, that when we come back, we will be doing Hadith number 4 of the 40 Hadith in Imam Nawawis famous Arba'een collection. But the announcement after Isha that there's going to be a youth program and that there's going to be some young men and perhaps even young women, I'm kind of toying with the idea in my mind if it's appropriate. For the simple reason is, one, it's an ilmi thus, it's a kind of a knowledge-based lesson, which doesn't suit everyone. In fact, it tends not to suit younger people, and I don't want to put them to sleep before the actual main event, and definitely before the food. Okay. That's one thing. Second thing is the actual hadith itself is, in one sense, slightly complex, only because it involves the issue of qadr, pre-decree, predestiny, or destiny, and explaining qadr, the measuring out and pre-decree, is quite often difficult, even towards adults and mature minds. So much so that the Prophet ﷺ on one occasion in the authentic hadith said, إِذَا ذُكِرَ قَدْرَ فَامْسِكُوا. When qadr is mentioned, then withhold, meaning withhold from speaking about it. And that is in the sense of either we get it the first time in its generalities, or we don't get it. And if we labour the explanation, it tends to confuse. So just let it be. As long as one has iman bil qadr, that Allah has decreed everything bil azl, from pre-eternity, then whether we can square the circle and whether we can join the dots and whether we can explain it articulate it in good logical terms, that's secondary. So because it does involve qadr, I'm thinking, is this the right kind of setting to do so? So I'm kind of still toying with that idea. I know some of you will come for the 40 hadith. The alternative is that we could do something very general and light, and I can keep it quite short, therefore, and then give the precedence to the program, which is not a regular program for the youth of today, men of tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala. So would you mind if we take a preference to the program, and we'll keep this lesson short, so that the actual event can take place sooner than later, and we will continue with hadith number 4 next week, inshallah ta'ala. Is that okay? Subhanallah, mashallah, wa quwwata illa billah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us tawfiq. Okay. So since I haven't got anything particularly prepared, unless someone's got a particular question, I'm just going to roll with inshallah, as they say. Any particular questions? Or shall I roll? Okay, bismillah, let me roll. Wabillahi tawfiq. Okay. In hadith number 2, the long hadith of the angel Jibreel alayhi salam, in which the whole manhaj or methodology of a Muslim is summed up: Iman, Islam, Ihsan. That the Prophet was explained that the whole of the religion can be summed up in beliefs, represented here by Iman, practices, or outward practices, represented by Islam, and the actions of the heart and the spiritual states of the heart, Ihsan, excellence, spiritual excellence. And at the end, remember the Prophet ﷺ says, إِنَّهُ جِبْرِيلٌ آتَاكُمْ يُعَلِّمُكُمْ دِينَكُمْ. That was the angel Gabriel. He came to teach you your religion. So our ulama, our scholars have emphasized this, that the obligations upon every Muslim are in 3 broad areas. Generally speaking, are in 3 broad areas. When the Prophet ﷺ says to us, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيدَةً عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ, the seeking of knowledge is obligatory upon every Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ is speaking about a core amount of knowledge, which every Muslim who is over the age of legal responsibility, who is baligh, every Muslim is obligated to know. A core amount of knowledge. It is not that I have to know every issue in Islam. It's not that I have to memorize every hadith. It's not that I have to become a highly seasoned scholar of faqih, jurist. But as a Muslim, I'm obligated, man or woman, I'm obligated to learn a core amount of knowledge for which I will not be excused. Neither in 7th century Arabia at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, nor in 21st century London. I won't be excused. And that's what the Prophet ﷺ meant by talabul ilmi faridatan ala kulli muslim. The seeking of knowledge is compulsory upon every Muslim. And the reason why I'm emphasizing this again, even though we covered it right at the beginning of the book, is because this is something that gets lost on us. Understandably, young people miss out on a lot of obligatory knowledge. But worse than that is that elders, those of us with white hair in our beards and heads, can quite often be unaware, ignorant even, in some basic things of Islam for which we may not be excused. And of course, if I don't know what the right thing is, I can't do the right thing. Al-ilmu qabla al-qawli wal-amal. Remember, knowledge comes before speech and action. And therefore it's very important that teachers in Islam, scholars, teachers, consistently remind themselves and others what are those basics. And the Hadith Jibreel, the second Hadith which we covered over a period of 3 weeks, is, well, does anyone remember what it was, one of the names that was given to this Hadith Jibreel, the second Hadith of the angel Gabriel? What title was given to it? It was similar to the title given to Surah Al-Fatiha. What's the title? What's one of the names given to Surah Al-Fatiha, the opening chapter of the Quran? The mother of the book. Do you know how that goes in Arabic? Ummul Kitab. Ummul Kitab. Absolutely, you're right, young man. The mother of the book. Ummul Kitab. And Ummul something, Ummul Balad, Ummul Kitab, is referring to the essence of. I mean, literally it means mother of something. But here it doesn't mean mother as in the biological sense. It means the essence of something. Surah Fatiha is Ummul Kitab, the mother of the book, because in its 7 verses, in its 7 ayat, it more or less encompasses the whole of the Quranic message. Okay? It tells us some essential things about God, about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It tells us about the purpose of our being created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Worship. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. It tells us about something about this world, that it comes to an end, and then there will be a day of judgment, and Allah is Maliki Yawmiddin. He is the master of that day of judgment. He's a master of every day, but in this world, shaitan can make us forget, our egos, our nafs can make us forget who truly is master. On that day, there will be no pretensions. Okay, the illusion will just disappear, and the reality, the haqiqah, will be glaring us and staring us in the face. So just as Surah Fatiha is Ummul Kitab, the mother of the book, the Hadith Jibreel is known as, does that jog anyone's memory now? Ummul Hadith, close, Sunnah. Sunnah, the mother of the Sunnah. For the same reason, because this particular hadith, where this stranger comes who we now know is the angel Gabriel and asks the Prophet ﷺ, what is Islam, what is Iman, what is Ihsan, and the Prophet ﷺ explains the essentials of Iman being Amantu billahi wa malaikati wa kutubi ila akhir al-jumla, to believe in Allah, the angels, the books, the messengers, the last day and divine decree. And then is sadaq, that you have spoken rightly, truthfully. أخبرني عن الإسلام, tell me about Islam. Islam is to testify to the Shahada, La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. La ilaha illallah we could translate as there is no God but God, but actually La ma'buda bihaqqin illallah, there is none who deserves to be worshipped except Allah, none has the right to be worshipped except Allah. So if we translate it as there is no God but capital God, then we should understand what we mean by that. There is none deserving to be the true God, worthy of worship, except Allah. Establish the prayer, give the zakat, fast in Ramadan, perform the pilgrimage to Makkah if you're able. أخبرني عن الإحسان, tell me about ihsan. أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. This is really profound. Every time every time you think about this, it can kind of put a lump in your throat. To worship Allah as though you see Him, and though you may not see Him, know that He sees you. And if you remember in this hadith, which is the point I don't want to get to today, because I don't want to go through the whole hadith again, the angel asked about the signs. Tell me about the signs of the Day of Judgment. And the Prophet ﷺ responded quite emphatically, the one being questioned, tell me about the hour. When is the hour? When will the last hour come? And the Prophet ﷺ replies that the one being questioned knows no better than the one questioning. Meaning this knowledge is only with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, I have, meaning the Prophet ﷺ has been given an incredible amount of knowledge. And it is important to understand that there are verses in the Quran which will say that the ilmul ghayb, knowledge of the unseen, is only with Allah. And yet there are verses which will say that Allah reveals of the ilmul ghayb, of the ghayb, to those of His servants whom He chooses. And this is something which presents a problem between Muslims, because we've reached a stage, largely because of our ignorance, but I dare say because of our egos as well, in which my party's got to be right, my sheikh has got to be right, your sheikh has got to be wrong. Why? Because it's not my sheikh who's always right. Okay. Even though I'm ignorant, but my sheikh's got to be right, your sheikh's got to be wrong. Okay. We've learned not to be bigoted in football clubs. Most of the first generation of Muslims here, my parents, first people to come into the UK or whatever, second generation, the first people to be born here, have risen above nationalism, that kind of bigotry. But we've become bigoted in other ways. Okay? It's a lot to do with the nafs, the ego. And by that I mean that we can actually declare each other unbelievers and deviants without understanding each other's opinion. One of the scholars of the 7th Islamic century, which will make it around about the 14th century of the common era of the standard calendar that we use, the Gregorian calendar. A Syrian scholar by the name of Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, he makes a really nice point in one of his books. He says that oftentimes, and these are my words, oftentimes when people argue, when religious people argue, when Muslims argue about an issue that has become an issue, oftentimes it's a case of there is truth and falsehood with one party and truth and falsehood with the other party. And they are both to be praised for the truth that they have acknowledged, and they are both to be censured or blamed for the truth that they reject from the other. So, and that causes splits and divisions, and worse. And yet, if you take this issue of ilmul ghayb, knowledge of the unseen, such as when is the last hour, the Prophet ﷺ here says, the one who is being questioned knows no better than the question. I mean, I don't know. This is with Allah. So there is a type of ilmul ghayb, a knowledge of the unseen, which only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. And yet the same Quran will tell us that I reveal of the ghayb, I reveal of the unseen to those of my servants I choose. And so we understand that the Prophet ﷺ has been given an incredible amount, relatively speaking, compared to other human beings, including other prophets, He's been given an incredible amount of knowledge of things that are to occur in the future and things that have occurred in the past. Okay? In fact, in the authentic hadith in Bukhari, the Prophet was asked by a group of Yemenis that what was the beginning of this matter? And most of our scholars, there's a slight difference of opinion in explaining this, but most of our scholars say the word amal, matter or affair, is referring to the beginning of creation, the alam al-shahid, the visible world, what we call the cosmos or the universe. And the Prophet simply answered, Allah was and none was with him. Allah was and none was with him. And in one narration, Allah was and none was with him, and his arsh, his throne, was above the waters. I mean, that's not just human history, that's just going back. We know that in Sahih Muslim that the Prophet that hadith in Sahih Bukhari. In Sahih Muslim, the Prophet one time, after Fajr prayer, he gave a sermon, a khutbah, and he told the listeners, the audience, of all of the major fitnas, all of the major trials and tribulations and seditions that will happen until the end of days. And then sun rose, okay, Dhuhr came in, they prayed Dhuhr, after which he continued the same theme to the audience, continued telling them about the fitnas, who would start it, what is the name of the person or the persons who would start it, their father's names, their father's names, their tribe. One narration says some area which it could happen. Dhuhr went, he's continuing up until Asr, prayed Asr, continued the same theme. That's a long time. Okay, I can't remember if he continued after Asr or not. One could go back to the hadith unless someone can remember it, but wallahu a'lam. But let's just say it stopped at Asr. He's often told of the major seditions, events and fitan until the end of days. Who would start it? The name, the father's name, and the tribe's name. That's a lot of knowledge. And one of the Sahaba said that I've forgotten much of what he told us, but whenever an issue begins to occur, it jogs my memory and I remember. That's a lot of knowledge. However, the way we make jam, the way we harmonize, or the way the scholars harmonize between, on the one hand, none knows the knowledge of the unseen except Allah. There are many verses with that meaning. And then when you have the verse saying that I reveal of the unseen to those of my servants whom I choose, how did you make jam? Because we know one part of the Quran doesn't contradict another. Why doesn't one part of the Quran contradict another? Okay, think of who the Quran is. What is the Quran? The Quran we call? What's the Quran?
Allah's word.
Allah's word, okay? Kalam Allah, the speech of Allah. Okay? And anything to do with one of Allah's qualities like speech, it's perfect. No deficiency. Allah is not just unique, one, but He's perfect. Okay? So the Quran is Kalam Allah, Allah's speech. And so if Allah's speech is perfect, make the link. Allah's speech is perfect. I'm saying, why can't there be contradictions in the Quran? Because that would imply, that would mean, if there were contradictions in the Quran, that would mean what?
Imperfection in His speech.
Barakallahu feekum. Imperfection in His speech. That Allah, na'udhu billah min dhalik, has contradicted Himself. He's slipped up somehow, na'udhu billah min dhalik. And we don't consider, that's impossible. That's impossible. The only reason why the Quran may seem contradictory is because my limited knowledge may not be able to reconcile one set of verses with another. I may be ignorant of some parts of the Quran because I haven't memorized it. So I don't know these verses and I don't know the other verses. But someone whom Allah is blessed to have a good, sound knowledge of the Quran, not even tam, not even complete, but good and sound, inshallah is less likely to fall into thinking the Quran has contradictions. So this apparent contradiction, Allah knows the unseen, but only Allah knows the unseen, but He reveals it to His servants. It's apparent, meaning that it's not really a contradiction, but it seems like, is resolved simply. Allah knows the ghaib mutlaqan, absolutely. He doesn't know it in just general outlines. He doesn't know it 50%, 30%, 80%. He knows it absolutely perfectly, and he's always known it. It's not that Allah's knowledge grows. Allah has always known. Allah knows and will continue to know. In this sense, his ilm, his knowledge is wahid, one, in that it doesn't grow. Knowledge, the reason why our knowledge grows is because we're deficient in the beginning. We're ignorant in the beginning, and then we get taught, and then we learn a bit more. And then we reach a particular age, and then it goes back down. We start forgetting through senility. That's creation. Creation has that imperfection. People have that imperfection. Allah doesn't have that imperfection. So on Allah, only He knows the ghaib al-mutlaq in absolute terms. And He knows it kulli, not juzi. He knows it completely, not partially. And He knows it ghayr istiqlal, independently. No one taught Him. No one told Him. Allah just knows. All other people, including the Prophet ﷺ, even though he, amongst the whole of creation, including the angels, has the greatest knowledge of things. Okay? And he has been given the greatest knowledge of the ghaib, in the unseen things, in the sense of things that you and I didn't see because they happened in the past, things that you and I haven't seen because they're going to happen in the future, things that you and I don't know because Allah hasn't revealed it to us. But this is a person, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who went past the Sidratul Muntaha, the low tree at the furthest limits on the Mi'raj, on the night of the Mi'raj. And what transpired between Allah and His beloved, we just have glimpses of that. Things that the Prophet told us, things that he was commanded to tell us by Allah. But between Allah and His beloved, there could be more things that have transpired that maybe can't be put into words or wasn't to be mentioned. So we know that the Prophet, there is this connection there. But the Prophet's knowledge of the ghaib is not mutlaq. It's not absolute. And it's not kulli, it's juz'i. He, sallallahu only knows the things that Allah told him. He knows lots of things about the unseen, but not absolutely and perfectly like Allah. Only Allah knows that. And the Prophet's knowledge of the unseen is dependent on being taught by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas so it's istiqlali, it's dependent, it's dependent, it's not independent. Making jump is really important. Harmonizing is very important. Why? Because you end up splitting Muslims into unnecessary factions. Muslims are going to split into factions, unfortunately, but we don't help the process along. We try to counter that process. Anyway, in that hadith, the Prophet was asked, tell me about when the hour will come. He says, I don't know when the hour is. Then tell me about its signs. And the Prophet gave 2 signs. And those signs can be summed up with, and which is what I want to just finish today with. Those signs can be summed up with, if I can just get to the page. He spoke about that the slave girl will give birth to her mistress, meaning that, according to the dominant reading and dominant understanding, parents will give birth to children who will be very disobedient. And he spoke about the barefooted, scantily clad herdsman or shepherd competing in building lofty buildings, which generally our scholars from day one to day now have been agreed upon in its understanding what that means, that those who don't have, those who once were Bedouins or shepherds who really don't interact with much civilization, and nor are they really people known for great wealth and whatever, will start coming into incredible amounts of wealth, because that's how you can. That's the only way you can build lofty or huge buildings. And people who don't have an understanding of how to deal with money and how to deal with be madani, be civil, will come into huge fortunes, and they really won't know what to do with it, except it will be a trial for them. But both of those things, all they show is that towards the end of time, things will become topsy-turvy. Things will become upside down. Good will be made to look bad, bad will be made to look good, right will seem wrong, wrong will seem right. What seems to be honourable will be considered dishonourable, and what's dishonourable will be considered to be honourable, and on and on and on. Topsy-turviness of the world. So remind ourselves of one or two hadith for those who were in the class. The Prophet said, لا تقوم الساعة حتى يكون أسعد الناس في الدنيا لكعاء ابن لكعاء. The last hour will not be established until the most fortunate of people in this world will be Luka'a ibn Luka'a. And it's just a phrase, it means the wretched one, son of the wretched one. The one who's got no skill, got no ability, got no qualifications of anything, just a worthless person, son of a worthless person will be the most fortunate of people. Why? Because you have no qualities or qualifications of anything, but maybe, for example, in this country, I'm not saying this is what the hadith actually means specifically, but when I was growing up in school, back in the 70s, and the teacher would ask you, right, what would you like to be when you grow up? You know, there was, I want to be a footballer, I want to be a ballerina. I didn't say I wanted to be a ballerina, but you know, that was an answer. I want to be a spaceman, an astronaut. I want to be this, I want to be that. The more you realise your Asian roots, I want to be a doctor. I want to be another doctor, and I want to be a doctor, and if I don't make that, I'll be an engineer. Right, okay. But it will be something, and all of these things, whatever it be, footballer to ballerina to spaceman, it requires effort, skill, training, practice, talent. Now, when children are asked, I'm not saying every child, but now when children are asked, given the current culture, I want to be a celebrity. It requires, all you need to do to be a celebrity, providing the media is in the right place and the right time, is you need to kind of, New Year's Eve, go and vomit on an important statue or an important person, hoping that the paparazzi are there. That will make you a celebrity. You'll have your 40 minutes of fame, right? You need to be irreverent. You need to do something stupid that any person could do. That any person could do. Okay? And the one who is worthless, has no talent, no ability, then becomes glorified until the media want to bring them down. They'll have their year or 6 months or 2 years of stardom. That type of imagery is what is being suggested here. I'm not saying exactly, but the worthless one, son of the worthless one. Another hadith. إذا وصد الأمر إلى غير أهله فانتظر الساعة. The Prophet said in the authentic hadith, when the affair is given to one who is not deserving of it, then await the hour. When وصد الأمر, وصد can mean leadership, from sa'ada. When leadership, okay, is given to the one who doesn't deserve it, فانتظر الساعة. So await the hour. That can be across the board. It might be politically. Those who aren't suited rule. But it can just as well apply to, well, Abu Aaliyah yesterday he was in the clubs, he was raving and he was doing whatever, and jamming with the crew. And then someone told him about Islam, he became interested, he started praying, then he was introduced to some books in English, he got 4 or 5 books on his bookshelf, he listened to 1 or 2 good talks, he learned 1 or 2 Arabic words, or even sentences, and now he's giving fatwa. And worse than that, you know this about me, as an example. Inshallah, it's not like this. You know this about me. And you let me lead the prayer. Or you let me lead the khutbah. We have now conspired to give the affair to one who's not qualified. Yes, I've read a few books. I've read this, that, the other. Maybe I can tell my neighbour about God is one. We don't celebrate Christmas because Christmas, even though it's a commercial festival, about 2 billion people on this planet who are Christians, and 1 billion of them are Catholic Christians, do take their Christmas seriously. And Christmas is a veneration of Jesus Christ, na'ud billah, being the Son of God, or a part of a Trinity. And that goes against Tawheed, against Abrahamic monotheism, against the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, even though it seems harmless for me to have a Christmas tree in my house, I mean, I don't believe it, but I should not venerate or honour anything that has a way of insulting Allah, His glory, His oneness, His tawheed. Okay? Maybe I can explain that to my next door neighbor, because I don't need to necessarily be a scholar. I know Qul Huwallahu Ahad, Allahu Samad. Okay? So maybe I can say that. Maybe I can explain that Mary isn't in any form of deity, but she was a righteous woman. And I'm that aware of the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, many men have reached perfection. Kamali, many men have reached perfection. But only 4 women have. And he mentioned Maryam alayhi salam, Mary, mother of Jesus Christ, peace be upon them both. But to give a fatwa, to give a religious verdict, to teach fiqh, Islamic law, jurisprudence, to go into some deeper issues of Islamic belief or aqidah, or something else like that, I need to have studied with the ulama. And even, as I said before, 25 years still studying with the, and I still study with the ulama. Actually, day by day, not literally day by day, but day by day, when I study more, I realize, I become convinced even more how little I know. How little I know. And the scholars from the ancient days used to have this beautiful saying. They said about knowledge, that knowledge is of, there are 3 stages in knowledge, for want of a better translation. In the beginning, you know that you don't know, and you start learning. And then obviously, I didn't know how to pray, now I know how to pray. I didn't know that I shouldn't be saying Merry Christmas because it's a religious greeting, although I can substitute it with maybe another greeting. Okay, and now I know. Okay, and obviously we don't do this in a way to be offensive purposely, but Tawheed, the oneness of God, is always going to offend someone at some level. Okay, but we don't go out to be offensive, purposely, intentionally. We need to be dissenting voices. We need to be dissenting voices, meaning disagreeing with things around us, wisely, courageously, without shouting. Okay? Wisely, courageously, without shouting. And where we can, with khidmah, putting ourselves in service of others. Didn't the Prophet ﷺ say, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ أَنْفَعُهُمْ لِلنَّاسِ خَيْرُ النَّاسِ أَنْفَعُهُمْ لِلنَّاسِ. The best of people are those who are of most benefit to others. A young man knows when he's growing in knowledge. Check this out, brothers. A young man knows when he's growing in knowledge. Not by how many Arabic words he can. When you go down to SOAS and you see non-Muslims and see non-Muslim professors and you see some of their Arabic language, wallahi, subhanallah, it'll put most of us Muslims to shame. But it's about, knowledge is about my connection with Allah and then how I am with others. A man grows in knowledge, he grows in service of his parents first and foremost. Man doesn't grow in service of, man learns more knowledge and he doesn't grow in service of his parents, you know that the man doesn't have knowledge. You know the man only has facts. You know that knowledge is just on the tip of your tongue. It didn't enter, Allah didn't allow it to enter into the heart. When we grow in knowledge, we grow in humility. All that strutting stuff and all that nafsi, ego stuff begins to diminish. When we grow in knowledge, we become less argumentative. Of course, we want to state the truth that we understand, but less argumentative. When we grow in knowledge, we begin to understand the diversity and the worth of people. We used to learn when we were young, from the khutbahs, the 4 Imams, Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi, Imam Ahmad, radiallahu anhu, how great they were. Alhamdulillah, we used to accept it, as is a good thing to do. But if we then began to read firsthand some of the legal reasonings of Imam Abu Hanifa, subhanallah, subhanallah. Imam Malik radiallahu anhu used to say, in those times that Abu Hanifa would make a journey to the Hijaz, to Makkah and to Medina, where Malik would be in Medina, he would always put Abu Hanifa was senior in age on his right-hand side. When Imam Nawawis was teaching the Prophet's masjid, and he said, I know a man who, if he convinced you that this pillar of stone was made of gold, he could convince you. Meaning because of the legal, because of the aql, because of that brilliant mind. But it wasn't just a brilliant mind, it was a pious heart. It was a pious heart. Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, rahmatullah alayh, in the Jami' al-Ulum, and others, Imam Dhahabi in the Sirah al-Alam and other places, say that Abu Hanifa was one of those few people who, is not something we need to follow, who would finish the entire Quran, a khatam of the Quran, in a single day. Tamim al-Dari, Uthman ibn Affan, Jabir ibn Abdullah from the Sahaba were known to have done that. And some of the Tabi'un, whose names I can't remember now, including Imam Abu Hanifa. This is piety. Of course, our way is, or our aim is, that we'll try not to finish the Quran in less than 3 days because we won't understand it. But even 3 days is probably just too much, so we will try to finish the Quran at least once a month. One juz, one part every day if we can. And if we're not doing that, we can strive for some kind of, that kind of mark, so that we can have a connection with the Quran. But, subhanallah. When we know about such people, then we begin to understand there is a great gulf between us. And even though it's true, نحن رجال وهم رجال, we are men, we are people, and they, the people of the past, like the Sahaba and the Tabi'un and these great Imams, and they too are men. But what a difference in manhood. What a difference in manhood. What a difference in Rajuliyah. Rajuliyah, manhood in Islam, is not some biological hairs on the chest. Because if you're talking about hairs on the chest, check out a baboon. Plenty of hairs. Or someone who can scare people, check out the great ape in the zoo. He's frightening. Rajuliyah, manhood in Islam, and by extension womanhood, is we are trying to develop that heart of ihsan, to worship Allah as though seeing Him. And we are trying to develop that heart that the Prophet had. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We didn't send you except as a mercy to the worlds. That is manhood. We will see next week Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, skinny, very skinny. His shins were so skinny that people used to joke about them, make jokes about them, and sometimes he used to get a bit upset, but he was definitely conscious about the skinniness. He was skinny anyway, but his shins were even skinny. And when the Prophet ﷺ said to the men, for the men, that irfa izar, that raise your lower garments, like raise your trouser, or raise your thong or tunic that you might be wearing on your lower half, raise your lungi, okay, raise your lower garment. Ibn Mas'ud said that if I raise my garment, my shins will show. And if my shins show, they will start laughing at me again. And, it's sticks and stones, but, I don't really want to endure that. And the Prophet said, no, the izar of the believer must be raised above his ankle bone. And he didn't give Ibn Mas'ud an excuse. According to a minority opinion of scholars, when I say minority, it's not irrelevant, it's just that more scholars say the opposite than this. But the minority of scholars from there, they say it's wajib, it's an obligation for a Muslim man to raise his lower garment above his ankle. This is not the first pillar of Islam or the second pillar or even the 10th pillar. This is not going to liberate Palestine or whatever, but we need to have some type of ihtimam and ihtiram, concern and reverence towards the teaching of the Prophet, even if I'm not able to do it yet. Why? Because he is the perfection of creation, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah chose for him to live a particular way. And where we can't follow his way, we should at least have the heart of, I would like to follow his way. but my circumstance, my society, my weakness of faith, my surroundings won't allow me to do certain things. Fine. But at least there should be, instead of me arguing why I shouldn't be following the Sunnah, let me put some effort into convincing my heart why I should. And so, yes, it is true that the majority of scholars said this is the Muslim man raising his trouser above his ankle bones is recommended, not obligatory. That is to say, if he does it, he gets rewarded a lot. And if he doesn't do it, there is no sin. And that seems to be, at least in the middle, with the latter scholars of Islam from the year 500 onwards, that seems to be, and Allah knows best, the majority position. Nevertheless, from the beginning up until now, you found that there have been a significant number of scholars who say it's actually, well, it's an actual obligation. And they turn to hadith like Ibn Mas'ud, that the Prophet didn't give him an excuse. And you'd think, if someone has an excuse, this man would have had an excuse. Point being is, Ibn Mas'ud, going back to it, he was a very thin, slim, skinny character, and yet he was one of the great courageous men of Islam. Because manhood isn't necessarily in your physical size. It's in the size of our hearts. It's in the size and the quality of our hearts. And following the Sunnah is not, well, you know what, I've got a hat on my head and I've got a beard on my chin. Sunnah, sorted, done and dusted. The Sunnah, the spiritual Sunnah takes precedence over the legal Sunnah. If someone came, a non-Muslim came into this masjid and asked any of us, describe your prophet to us. We want to know something about this man called Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We wouldn't say, well, he was a man of medium height, neither too short nor too tall, neither too wide nor too thin, and his beard was about a fistful, and it had less than 10 white hairs in, and in this particular time, his hair reached down to his shoulders, and the side of his hair reached down to his earlobes, and he wore this, and we wouldn't say that. We would say, in order to describe the Prophet, we would say he was the most godliest man, most God-fearing man, had the greatest knowledge and piety of Allah. He was most generous, most courageous, very compassionate to those around him. He wouldn't lie, he was deeply truthful. And all of these qualities are not zahir, are not outward qualities of the limbs, they're inward states of the heart. Then come the outward qualities. One of the devil's deceptions today is the Sunnah has been externalized only. I am upon the Sunnah when I look visibly upon the Sunnah. Even though I lie, I cheat, I have no compassion, I don't have those essential qualities that were fundamental to the Prophet's khuluq, for which Allah praised him in the Quran. Allah didn't praise him for a beard, even though the beard is part of Islam. But Allah praised him for his khuluq, his character. إِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. Indeed, you are on a tremendous standard of character. And just on that point, my brothers and elders, إِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. This is a really if you look at that Arabic language there, something really remarkable is going on. Because Allah is not just saying, you are upon a great standard of character. Because the word inna in Arabic is a word of emphasis. Sometimes you translate it as indeed, verily. It's emphasizing something. Okay? There's a difference between, I know it's a bit old language, we don't use this language anymore, but this is a good book, and indeed this is a good book. The word indeed is that emphasis, is that taqeed, which makes the affair even stronger. So Allah used inna, innaka, indeed. But then he used the word innaka la. And la is, for want of to simplify the discussion, la in Arabic, this lam in Arabic here, is an emphasis. So it's like indeed, indeed.
Double emphasis.
Double, absolutely. And then Allah used the word ala. He could have used the word fi, and it would have said the same thing. But innaka la ala instead of fi. And ala in this case is much more fasih. It's far more eloquent and emphasizing the point again. So now we have a triple. Indeed, indeed, indeed. And then he didn't say good khuluq. He said khuluq azim, tremendous character. Indeed, verily, surely you are upon a tremendous character. And then some of our ulama and some of our arbab al-qulub, spiritual masters say, there is another matter which is not actually in the verse, which adds the greatest emphasis, which is, I know this is a bit of an old school because I don't know my football anymore, but let's just say the person of the day, the person in my day would be a guy called Pele, right? The person of like 10 years ago, at least in this country, would have been like saying someone like Beckham. So let me stick with Beckham only because I can't think of anyone else, right? Okay. If David Beckham came and we were all playing football in the yard, right? And David Beckham came and said, you know what? You're pretty skillful with dribbling the ball. That praise of me would mean much more than Afwan, Usthadh. If Usthadh Dia, Hafidh Dia said, oh, Abu Aaliyah, you're really good at dribbling the ball, because in the end, well, does he know football or not? Maybe he plays badminton and not football. Right? So Hafidh Dia saying it to me, okay, doesn't mean much, unless of course he's a brilliant footballer, then it will mean something. But Beckham saying it to me, whoa, this skillful guy is saying that I've got skill. Well, go back to that Quranic verse. Who is saying to the Prophet ﷺ that he is on a brilliant standard of character, that he has brilliant character? Who's saying it? Allah. Who can give? Inna Allah jamilun yuhibbul jamal. Allah is beautiful and he loves beauty. Allah is beautiful in perfection. And he is saying that our Prophet ﷺ has beautiful character. But we are, to finish this, we are in a time in which our beauty needs to be strengthened with courage. Not anger, not violence, not ego, but with courage. Why? Because day by day, it may not seem it, like in this local area, Campbell Road, we've got a new masjid, more and more people, inshallah, are coming to the masjid. But on the whole, day by day, practicing Islam, even in such a fairly moderate country like this, is getting harder and harder. And the resistance to basic Islamic practices is getting tougher and tougher. Things that not just Muslims, any human being would have taken for granted that that's the way human beings are, have now changed. The odd things which were normal have become odd, and things which were highly odd in not just Muslim society, any human civilization, are becoming quite acceptable. In the one sense, that makes Islam difficult to practice. But on the other hand, Allah has told us in the Quran, this religion will be practicable, livable, up until the end of days. Anyway, two things we bear in mind. It's getting harder and harder. So much so that our Prophet ﷺ said that there will come a time when holding on to our religion will be like holding on to burning hot coal. And don't try that back home. And yet on the other hand, we have been given the hope and the optimism that Islam will still be livable and practicable, so don't despair. So we now need courage along with compassion. Compassion so that the message of Tawheed reaches the hearts, and the hearts feel attracted to Tawheed, to the message of Islam, to Iman. And courage because the voices of falsehood, or the voices of ignorance, or the voices of misunderstanding are saying things against Islam on the media, through academic circles, and it's reaching people. And unless Allah gives us thabat, firmness, and we are not going to be able to do this ourselves, we are not going to be able to be firm ourselves. If anyone thinks he or she can be firm by themselves, he hasn't understood Tawheed. He hasn't understood Allah. He hasn't understood Insan. Unless Allah Jalla wa Ala gives us thabat, and we ask Allah for firmness, we will buckle under pressure. So to finish it, we are in a state now, for want of a deeper discussion, whereby you have Muslims who are being firm, but they're being firm in violent ways, and they're putting people off Tawheed, the oneness of Allah. In fact, they're being so firm, they're becoming extreme without. Then the opposite of that, so extreme like behead the kuffar, kill this and do that, that's not the way. It's not the way. The opposite of that is some people saying, actually, we need to reinvent Islam, retweak Islam, so Islam fits exactly with the liberal secular order. Their values become our values. Okay? So these, for want of a better word, these liberal type of Muslims, whereby in the end they're so enamored, their hearts are so enamored with the dominant order that it's just drifting and drifting away from the Quran and the Prophet's teaching. So you have that. And then you have some Muslims who say, well, I'm going to keep on to my deen, my religion, and I'm just going to live as a hermit, insulate myself. I'm going to stick with Muslim people, talk to Muslim people, work only with Muslim people, eyes will only see Muslim people, and we end up ghettoizing. And the difficulty with that is, the Quran tells us, never did we send a prophet except that they were men from the people of the cities. The message of Islam, Iman, Tawheed, is a Madani message. It's a city, town message. It's not for just Bedouins and hermits in some hut or some cave. It's for everybody. And if we ghettoize ourselves, that message doesn't reach out. Okay. And then the fourth option seems to be that we try to remain firm. We try to avoid the two extremes as best as we can. And the best way to do that is having some basic knowledge, sticking with the ulama and the awliya. The ulama, scholars, and the awliya. Bad translation, but will be saints. People who have أَن تَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ كَأَنَّكَ تَرَاهُ, worship Allah as though they see Him, فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَاهُ فَإِنَّهُ يَرَاكَ. And I say that because not every person who has outward religious knowledge is a good example, or has deep worship. Once upon a time, the scholar was the saint. Okay, Abu Hanifa, rahimullah, he's the alim, but he's the wali. Malik, rahimullah, he's the alim, but he's the wali. Imam Shafi, Imam Ahmed, they are the ulama and they are the awliya. But as time goes by, that doesn't necessarily happen. Now, I don't want to give us an impression that most scholars don't practice their knowledge. No, inshallah, most scholars do. But not necessarily that every scholar is that person who can connect you to Allah. But neither do we want to go to the extreme and just get someone who does lots of sajdas and rak'ahs and tasbih, but he doesn't even know this halal from that haram, this sunnah from this bid'ah, this tawheed from this shirk. We don't want that as well. We want both. We want both. We need to engage wisely, carefully, courageously, but keeping to our sunnah. And this requires Allah to open up our hearts and minds, because we weren't here just to have a nice time. We weren't here just to make money. We weren't here to see if I can buy a house without interest and there will be money. We were here, okay, as the Quran will say, Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa. I'm placing on this earth a khalifa. Not the political sense. The word khalifa in the Quran doesn't occur in the political sense. It occurs in the Hadith in the political sense. Khalifa means a vicegerent, a custodian, a caretaker of the earth, one who will uphold Tawheed, and one who will keep the balance, the iqtidal in the land, the one who will not cause fasad fil ard, mischief on the world, the one who will stand as a shaheed, as a witness to Tawheed, the one who will try to represent the character of the Prophet and all the other prophets in their way that they live life. They live life in the service of Allah, at the service of others, in their worship of Allah. That's what we've been asked to do. Christmas is just a reminder that if we're not careful, our Eid could go a little bit like that. Christmas is an example whereby that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down with Prophet Isa alayhi salam something so true and pure, but for whatever reason that the people didn't hold on to it as it could, it got changed and mixed. Ignorance overrides the truth, and that could happen to us. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grant us the tawfiq, the grace to sincerely learn basic knowledge, and that we ask Allah that He helps us internalize that knowledge. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes us a benefit to Islam and the Muslims, and not harm and a hindrance to them. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes us a source of light for the non-Muslims to become interested in Allah. This is about Allah. This is about Allah. And you and I have no right to turn any human heart away from Allah. This is His earth. This is His air we breathe. This is His heart that He gave us. Or not His heart, but the heart that He gave us. Everything is about Allah. And if it's not about Allah, it's a footnote, either irrelevant or not so relevant. That's who we are. And it's no good just complaining about the non-Muslims. We need to stand in that courageous, compassionate way and do something. Christmas is that reminder to us, not just, oh, look at those people, they've gone astray and whatever, and some of them do this and some of them do that, and consumerism and. Just you and I know, come Ramadan, Muslim communities around the world, including the majority of Muslim countries, consume more food in the month of Ramadan than outside. So it's no good pointing fingers at others when we've got a lot of work to do. But the good thing is, Allah tells us that it's possible for us to do this with His help. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq, jazakallahu khayr, sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. I went on longer than expected. Not longer as in the class, but longer than intended. If there's no questions, inshallah, we can move on to the youth program, inshallah. I think enough of intensity. Any questions, or we can move on? Bismillah al-Shafiq.
I just want to ask you to give us some nasiha about the year is passing and the new is coming. So it might be for the Islamic perspective, what the nasiha you can give us.
The nasiha, the advice, what can I give? I can't give much advice other than what our ulama and the ahlullah, the people of Allah, give us, is that 1 year is passing, we're dawning into a new year, 2014, and that seems all very, very merry, and somewhere around midnight, in a few hours, the fireworks are going to kick off all over the place. And it is a spectacle, and the heart might be delighted and lightened, but once those fireworks and things die down, the believing heart needs to get back into that state of, actually, now that I've been distracted, what is life really about? What is the haqiqah here? The reality is that actually I've become closer to my death. I'm now 1 year, 1 second more, 10 minutes more closer to my death. And the thing about death is it's always based upon what have I done for death? What provisions have I made for maut? Am I that type of person? You know, as a cousin Hadith in Sahih Bukhari, there are some people who don't want to meet Allah. Prophet said in Hadith in Bukhari, those who don't want to meet Allah, Allah doesn't want to meet them. Imam Nawawis rahimahullah ta'ala in the Ihya al-Muddin says, that hadith tells us that people are 3 types. Those people who want to meet Allah, so Allah wants to meet them. Those people who they're living their life yearning for Allah, which is why prayer is the most important thing to them, because this is the closest they're ever going to get to Allah, because their hearts have a shauq for Allah. They have that yearning, that longing for Allah. May Allah grant us that shauq. So they love to meet Allah. They just, I mean, they see Allah with the eye of the heart. Ayn al-Basir in this world. And ta'budullah ka'annaka tara, worship Allah as though they see Him. And so Allah will give them the vision of Him in the hereafter. And I'll leave those people. From the Sahaba and the Tabi'un and the great Imams and scholars of the Salaf, the righteous from the men and the women, Aaliyah, and so on and so forth. Many from the ancient time, few from more recent times. ثُلَّةٌ مِنَ الْأَوَّلِينَ وَقَلِيلٌ مِنَ الْآخِرِينَ. Isn't that how it is? Then you have two more categories left. The category that don't want to meet Allah, and the people who don't want to meet Allah are of two types. So it makes three types more. So you have the type that wants to meet Allah, and Allah wants to meet them, which is what we need to aspire to. And then there is the type that doesn't want to meet Allah, and they are of two categories. One type doesn't want to meet Allah because they're just not interested in Allah. We said, La ilaha illallah, Allah, we've done you a favor. What are you going to give us in return? And my dua is just for fast car, bigger house. And this is halal. Now, Allah is the one who's bestowed. He's what halal is bestowed. So ask Allah for even a shoelace. But the Quran says there is a type of man who says, Oh Allah, oh my Lord, give us good in this world. And he will have Jahannam in the hereafter. And then there is a type of man, the next verse, that says, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Oh Allah, give us good in this world, and give us good in the hereafter, and ultimately save us from the punishment of the hellfire. Okay. So there are some people who just don't want to meet Allah. Hajj, let me just do it right at the end of my life, because I need to just rave and chill out, and I need to do as much haram as possible, and then inshallah, Allah Kareem, I'll do it. So many people die of a heart attack on that happens. Then there's a second type of people. So whoever doesn't want to meet Allah, Allah doesn't want to meet them. SubhanAllah, Allah doesn't want to meet them. SubhanAllah. You tell me that, you say to me, Abu Ali, your father doesn't want to see you again. I will feel shame, and I'll feel even more shame than you know. I will feel ashamed if no one knows. My own father doesn't want to meet me. What kind of son am I? My Lord doesn't want to meet me. Then there is a type of person who doesn't want to meet Allah. Why? Fear. Yeah, subhanAllah. He wants to meet Allah, but he doesn't want to meet Allah. He wants to meet Allah, but he looks towards his deeds. What have I done? I've done nothing. Why just give me a little time and I will change? And this person seriously wants to change. He wants to change. So he's got nothing. He's got very little at the moment. So he doesn't want to meet Allah in this state. But he does want to meet Allah. But if he meets Allah now, he feels that he's in serious trouble. Even though Allah is Rahim, Kareem, Ghafoor, Wadood. So he's like, Allah, give me more time, I'll change my way, I'll be with righteous people, I'll do my prayer. And Allah gives it. So this man is not counted like that man who doesn't really want to meet Allah. This man is counted as the one who wants to meet Allah, but he hasn't just done enough deeds. That's probably a lot of us Muslims. Okay. But we need to get to that state by the grace of Allah, by tawfiq, Allah's tawfiq, whereby we have the shauq to meet Allah. Allahumma inni as'aluka al-ladhatu an-nadhr ila wajhihi wa shawqa ila liqa'ihi, as occurs in the hadith, the dua in the Sunan al-Nasa'i. Oh Allah, grant me the delight of gazing at your face and the yearning, the longing to meet you. Hearts were created to love Allah. So what we draw is that one more year has gone. Okay, and though I might have got taller, though I might have got more wealthy, though I might have done so many other dunya things, but have I been drawn closer to Allah? Have I been drawn closer to Allah? And just by the way, and I say this for all areas, whilst the fireworks and the celebrations are kicking out, I guarantee you down Camp Road, I guarantee you down E11 and down E15, there are going to be old people in their houses, old people, Muslim, non-Muslim, probably Muslim, non-Muslims, who are alone, children don't come around anymore, such and such, and they're struggling to heat their houses. Gas has gone up, and they will be dying, as they do every year, of hypothermia. What good is it for me to tell you, oh, you know, in the seerah of the Prophet, he helped the slaves and the poor and the women and the orphans. Yet when we have the chance to make khidmah to Allah's creation, it doesn't even occur to us. All I'm worried about is, did I get the extra heater in from Argos, which is nice. But it's not really good for the sun. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq. It's serious. It's serious because the life is serious. And even though they want us to trivialize this world, my brothers and especially my youngsters, really, the biggest distraction we can have is dunya, is the world. It's not meant to be kind of a violent thing, but it's anyway.
Yeah, can I ask a question, please?
If you dare, I will dare respond, inshallah.
Okay. Do you know with the New Year, are we allowed to wish non-Muslims Happy New Year?
Okay. Definitely, the scholars are all agreed that Happy Christmas and Merry Christmas is not to be said. However, when you are greeted with a greeting, reply back with something similar. So, have a nice holiday, have some nice time off work, or whatever. So, not Happy Christmas. Even if we, of course, even as Muslims, we don't celebrate Christmas, but we still don't say that. As regards to New Year, our scholars differ. One group of scholars say, and this seems to be the majority, that we don't wish Happy New Year because Happy New Year is still a celebration that even if it's not religious, but it's a celebration outside of the two Eid celebration. We have two Eid celebrations. And therefore, we shouldn't engage in any celebration, religious or otherwise, that isn't from the Islamic teachings. And therefore, we don't wish anyone in that sense a Happy New Year, or we just say a nice holiday or whatever it be. Another group of scholars say